Today, we're going to be talking about Neon Genesis Evangelion episode 23, also known as Tears. I guess you wouldn't say also known. That's literally just the title spelled out. But either way, Matty boy, how are you doing today? I missed like the entire first block of dialogue, and I was just like, you know what? Wheels off. We're just going to go. Wheels will fall off, but we'll go. We're going.
That's
That
all
kind
right.
of feels like this episode.
Yeah. So I'm going to get into my thoughts on this because I already talked to you a little bit about this. But
Straight away. Okay.
I like this episode. Well, I don't know what you want to talk about. Look, you watch it. So
I'm here.
yeah, I don't know what I thought exactly. So I liked it, but I felt like there were a lot of things that they were putting in front of us, like, hey, here's this huge revelation,
Mhm.
but we've already been thinking about these things, and I think a lot of people at this point have already probably come to the conclusion that some of these things were what they're telling us now.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's another one of those things with the series where it's like, gosh, I wish some of this was done a little bit earlier rather than waiting so late, because by this time we've already figured it out. So
Yeah.
I would say there's still some of those things that come into play here that you're like, oh, didn't think that was the case. But for quite a few of them, I feel like we were already, headed down that track.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that the show holds on to a lot of its cards until the final few episodes, and then it's almost like it realizes, oh, I've kept it too close to the vest for too long. Now I just have to start frantically like throwing the cards out there and like cards on the table, And so you do have things like that where it's like, oh, okay, now we're loading up exposition. Suddenly it's like really dense, like we talked about. These episodes taking notes became like 2-hour efforts just taking the initial notes, let alone trying to like do supplemental research after the fact to explore some of this and try and figure out like, well, what is this symbol or what is this reference? Just taking the notes from the episode and hitting specific lines of dialogue became like a really tedious thing. So that is absolutely fair. There are still some cards it's keeping to the vest, so to speak. Even some of the stuff revealed here, you don't have a full reveal. You have a general reveal, enough that is supposed to, even if it's something that you were suspicious of, as you said, there's another layer yet to be revealed that's going to take it in a further direction, I think. So it's a fair criticism, but I do think that in whatever measure of defense for it, I don't even know if it's like a fully impassioned defense of it or anything like that. It's at least not laying everything out there. It is still trying to build, because there is still just a little bit more. There's 3 episodes left of the main series. Let's see, this is 23. Yeah, so 24, 25, and 26. And then eventually we get the end of Evangelion movie. So yeah, and that's for the original core series, because once the rebuild starts, it's almost like a reboot of sorts. Yes, it's fair criticism. I totally agree with that, and that's one of those things that even though I enjoy rewatching Ava, sometimes subsequent viewings I do pick up on some of these things where I'm just like, oh wow, I forgot how late in the game this is.
Yeah. The pacing is off, but if that's your biggest complaint with the show, like, you're still doing pretty good.
Yeah, it's a very, the depth of characters in this show is what I appreciate. Like, you can go 5, 6, 7, 8 characters deep, it feels like, in this show, and still have at least several layers of them where you kind of understand, like, okay, this character is like this because they had this experience in the past, whether it was growing up or whether it was this childhood trauma, whatever. And you can kind of like follow the bouncing ball to understand why it would lead to them being the way they are in certain interactions and things like that. And there's going to be a couple, I think, in this episode that we can actually start to delve into a little bit, a couple of these theories that I've been dancing around wanting to talk about. Can't get into all of them yet. There's one particular one that almost leads into another one that I really want to have the discussion, but I got to hold off on that one just a little longer. But a couple of these I think we'll actually be able to talk about now. So this episode originally aired March 6th of 1996, and we're opening up with Misato in her apartment. It's just filthy food containers everywhere. She's listening to that voicemail from Kaji, that final voicemail, and on her sign, or on her door, is a sign basically saying "working, do not disturb." And I like the little additional note written in. It's like, you come in, you die. Like, do not disturb. And Shinji and Pen Pen are just kind of out there, just like, all right, I guess it's just us then, because Asuka still hasn't come back. So right off the bat, you're like, yeah, this is fully deteriorating this situation here. There's no harmony just because Asuka's bitchiness is gone.
Now, when I saw those door signs, I thought one of those was Misato's, and I thought the other was Asuka's door. Am I wrong? Was that one door that both the signs were on?
Well, the working one was Misato's that said "working, do not come in." The "you come in, you die." I thought it was the same door, but maybe it was supposed to be separate doors. I'd have to look at that again. So,
Yeah, I'd have to go back myself. Maybe I didn't pick up on it, or who knows.
well,
But
yeah,
it seems more like an Asuka thing to say. Like you step foot in this door, you die.
you breathe my
Whereas,
air, you
yeah,
die.
Misato, I feel like that would be a little odd for her character, but I mean, it could
Yeah.
happen. So she's wrecked. Obviously, she's
Oh,
listened to
yeah.
Kaji's voicemail over and over, and make a comment about a phone that doesn't ring, and she's sad. She's having a tough time. You can tell that she's pretty impacted by his death, and I don't know if that would have been the case if it wasn't for like their love story kind of building to where it did
Mhm.
again. It's like if they didn't get back to the point where they were, would she still have been this impacted by it? But
Yeah.
yeah,
I imagine it would have been difficult in any circumstance, even if their reunion of sorts never went past like what we saw with his introduction in episode 8. I still think because of who he was and what she knows that he meant to her at a time, it would have been difficult. But to your point, yeah, they basically fully reunite, even if it is more of a booty call sort of thing where they just show up every now and then to kind of work through the physical urges of everything. It's definitely something where it hits her harder. And even though he's laid all this stuff out trying to get her the answer in his, I think that comes later on. In his message and everything, we know he gave her that capsule and everything, but she still can't really bring herself to continue forward. It's like she's in this cycle of grief because the phone that doesn't ring, she keeps waiting to hear from him again. Like, huh? Oh no, it's fine. I've just been busy the last couple days. Don't worry about that. That probably sounded bad, right? It's like she's in denial basically, and because she's in denial, she's like, well, I don't want to look into this because if I look into this, then it is confirmation that he is gone. I'd rather him call me and we'd be able to do this together or something, or at the very least he tell me more about it, like something he found while he's been radio silent for several days now.
yeah, yeah.
But
So we get
yeah,
into what's the next part here, where
class reps
Asuka's
room.
not going to school, right?
Yeah, yes. So finally know class rep's name, Hikari. It only took until this episode. Now there was one or two other character names, sub character names that I never really got down in the series, but I at least in the third to last episode have the class rep's name down. It is Hikari. Asuka is staying at Hikari's house, her apartment, whatever, and she's just playing video games all day. She won't sleep. She won't go to school. She won't go home. She's basically just mindlessly playing video games, totally numb, not even interacting with Hikari. So you can tell like she is backing up what she said about not staying in the same place as Misato and Shinji, not breathing their air, not sharing the same bath water or whatever. Like she's totally like, nah, I just don't want to be around any of you, really.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk real quick about the kids because this is something I don't know if I've asked about before.
Sure.
Does anyone have parents? Like, does anyone have parents with them that goes to this school, or are we to assume that all of these individuals? It's like you never see a parent. Like you see
Yeah.
Shinji's parent,
Mhm.
if you can call Gendo that, and then Misato, who's like his caretaker. But I don't think we've ever seen another parent to this point, have we?
I think no, we haven't. I believe the way that it works is we've mentioned before that with the school, all of the kids, their parents work for Nerve. And so my sort of working theory here is that Tokyo 3 is almost like a city built around the Nerve geofront. And so Nerve is like the employer essentially of the city. If you live in Tokyo 3, you effectively work in some capacity for Nerve, and that's probably like an incredibly time consuming thing. And so a lot of these parents are just kind of absentee, and all of the kids in the program in the school are candidates to be the new Ava pilots. So I think that's probably how that works. Because yeah, you never see another adult. You'll see adults who don't have kids. Like you see
Yeah.
different people in the command center, whether it's people that report to Misato or Risuko or whatever, but they're not people that you see having their own children. It's like if you have a kid and you work for Nerve, they're in this program, and you're probably so busy that you're not really seeing them anyway.
Yeah, it's like my question is, do they get a choice? Like, do these parents choose whether their kids are allowed to be in this program, or is it forced upon them by, like, a part of being Nerve? It's like I kind of
Yeah.
wanted to see that side of things, just because I feel like that's an interesting. I mean, it's like, can you
Mm,
imagine if there's like a parent and, like, let's say Toji's parents? It's like, what do they think about this? Like, what do they
yeah,
think about their daughter? Like, how are they feeling about this whole situation that's happening? But
I
it's like
agree.
this whole side that seems unexplored to this point.
I don't know. I agree. Like, imagine if after, especially after his younger sister was injured and in the hospital for an extended time, if you saw a scene in which, oh, when you find out Toji's going to be the fourth child, and they're like devastated by this, they're like, no, you can't take another one from us, basically. Even though the first one wasn't part of the Ava program, she was just injured in the fallout of an attack. That would be powerful because then it would show like this isn't something that people want, even if they understand by working for Nerve, this is a possibility. You would still be able to see sort of the authoritarian, almost dictatorship kind of qualities of it, where it's like, okay, well, here's how Nerve is kind of messed up because they're hearing from people that work for them and whose children they're taking to put in this program that they don't support it, they don't endorse it, they don't approve of it or consent to it or whatever. And Nerve is just like, too late. You already signed the paperwork once, or you already agreed once. Like, you don't have a say in it. Like, you live here, your house, everything is like, because that's what, like, and this is just me, like my own headcanon, I'm wrapping up here. You would see in the past these businesses that would almost own like these entire towns. And so, like, it would have like your own setup where it's like, oh, you work for us, and so you're provided with this housing, this sort of income that's you can spend within this city, like these businesses that are all within our sort of infrastructure and everything. But you're kind of trapped because you can't really go outside of that bubble. In that case, so Nerve in this sort of way could serve that same purpose, where it's like, yeah, well, all your possessions and everything are tied up in our, you know, our infrastructure, our bubble here. So you don't really have a choice at this point. Like, you've agreed to this, you knew it once. Doesn't matter if you're getting cold feet now. Like, this is what's happening. We
Yeah,
want your child to be the pilot. They're going to be a pilot as long as they're living and breathing and capable.
yeah, yeah. That's crazy.
Yep, that would be good. That's a fun headcanon to if you wanted to like expand the world, but there's no answer provided, I don't think, unfortunately.
Yeah. So getting back to Asuka at the class rep,
Hmm.
this is the Asuka that I wanted to see last episode that
Hmm.
I didn't get. So it's like I felt like that whole episode was devoted to, like, oh, feel sympathetic towards this character, but I wasn't feeling it. But immediately at the class rep's house, this is what I needed to feel that sort of sympathy for that character. Like, she's actually opening it up. She's being like a real person with somebody else, and we've already known that the class rep is the only person that she's ever, like, the closest to what we believe her true self is, like
Hmm.
actually feeling and speaking her emotions, and then breaks down crying. Like, that's a normal human being. That's what I needed to see. But last episode, I just got like cold, calculated Asuka,
Yeah.
and I just needed to see like a little bit more of the breakdown. And now I feel the sympathy for that character, like, because
Yeah.
I've seen her open up and be real for a minute.
Yeah, and I thought probably the part of it that was most impactful was, Asuka's going on this kind of this rant saying, I can't win fighting in my Ava. I'm not worth anything anymore. I hate it. I hate everyone. I hate myself. All that stuff. We've heard that stuff from her before. Hikari listens to her say all of this, and then she basically responds with like, I think you should do whatever you want to do. You do a great job. You should do anything that you want to do. Like she's basically like, I'm not passing any judgment on you. Whatever you decide to do that you want to do, like I support it. It's literally the validation Asuka has probably always wanted, and that's why she then breaks down. Like whereas before it was almost like she's hitting those familiar notes, but you can tell kind of in her own voice she's a little numb to it and just she's defeated. But finally having someone actually say the kind of thing that she's probably always wanted to hear, but not really known how to process, that's what finally breaks her. So yeah, it's a great little scene just to kind of show like as vulnerable and just absolutely devastated as she is. This is the first time where she's kind of just like her without the bravado, without the mask that she puts on and the act that she plays. It's just her authentic self.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like she would get more of that type of response,
Hmm.
but she puts up that wall and the barrier with everyone else in her life, her personal AT field,
Yep.
that this is the only time that actually gets brought down. So it's like she's, I feel like she's always seeking that type of response, but she's never giving anyone that part of herself for them to really respond to. They're just like, hey, she's like a little sociopath. Like she never acts normal. Like she's
Yeah.
crazy. She's just concerned about herself. But then when you like see the other side that is what's actually going on behind the curtains, it's like, wow, give somebody else that and then you're gonna get what you're looking for all along. But you get back to this is a child's like the
Yeah.
adults should know that this is a front. It's just that no one's paying enough attention and the more important stuff on the line. So she gets tossed to the wayside every time.
Hmm. Yeah, Nerve with all of their budget and everything, they're like, we've spared no expense except for a trained therapist on staff. We don't concern ourselves with such things.
Yeah,
Um,
except for the years and years of mental and emotional abuse.
yeah, Gendo's like, you know what? If anything, that probably actually works towards my goal. And big picture, there we're not going to get far enough into the future for them to actually like process this or suffer with it later in life. It's kind of just like, what are you going to do? So yeah. Then you get elsewhere. We got Risuko getting a call from her grandmother about, I guess, one of her cats died. There's two cat figurines on the desk, and so I'm guessing she had probably two cats. And her grandmother, probably because she worked so much, her grandmother was who was actually taking care of them. And one abruptly got sick and died, and she's just kind of like, "Oh, okay, no, I'll come visit soon." Like she's kind of just going through the motions of the conversation. But I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting, grandmother, because we know how her relationship was with her mother. I wonder if it's any different with the grandma. Oh no, we're moving on. All right, well, like it was just kind of like a quick little aside, just to. I think they're trying to set up with this little scene that like Risuko's world is also sort of starting to crumble here, and as we see that as this episode unfolds.
Yeah. Yeah, and with that, I wasn't sure if that was her cat or just the grandma's cat, but it's like
Hmm.
we know she's got cats. She's already been called out for like prioritizing cats over
Yeah.
people. Um, but I think that her body language in that scene said a lot too. Like when she gets that call and is told that one of the cats is dead, whether it's hers or her grandma's, she like crosses her legs,
Hmm.
which I just feel like that was kind of like showing her discomfort with the thought of like one day she will be alone and her cats will die and that will be just her in a house,
Yeah.
with her own thoughts. And that's at least what I was picking up from that scene. So
Yeah.
I think that there was a lot more going on there than just like the subtext of that conversation.
No, I agree. Sort of kind of holding herself for comfort almost, and just the unsettling thought of this idea of death. And she knows, obviously, as a scientist, like, well, yeah, of course it eventually comes, but not wanting to really confront it or think about it. And now it's kind of a reminder of it just cropping up unexpected around you. And you're just like, mm, that's kind of, disquieting. So you just kind of hold yourself a little bit against it, almost like bracing yourself, and then just try to, like she does, just try to put it out of mind and continue on because she's got a million other things going on.
Yeah. Yeah, so the next scene we get into the council complaining about Gendo losing the spear since they haven't already
Hmm.
completed their plans, kind of signifying like there was some more that needed to be done with that spear that we, they didn't get to use. So
Yeah.
how is that going to alter their plans? Which, we kind of got the idea with that being such a big move last time, but now it's actually spoken by the counselor.
Hmm.
Council, not counselor.
Yeah. Yeah, I was actually initially really excited for this scene because we've seen the council called upon several times recently. They've talked with Misato, they've talked with Fuyutsuki, they've they later on to talk with Risuko, but they're having these different conversations, and we know like they don't trust Gendo. They call him that man, or they're very very apprehensive about him. And so seeing Gendo talking with them, I was like, "Ooh, this is going to be good." It's so quick though because we end up having another angel attack interrupt it. But yes, they're talking about the Spear of Longinus. Gendo's basically just kind of brushing him off and ignoring it because, oh, Fuyutsuki calls and there's another angel attack imminent. They already have the sighting and they're basically called into action. Um, so I was a little disappointed with that because I don't know that we get really that conflict thinking about like the rest of the way. I don't know that we get Gendo facing off with the council for like this, sort of chess match essentially in this conversation, this interrogation effectively.
Yeah, I find it interesting that the council has changed too. So, like when we first got them, we got, these different colored hologram type things,
Mm-hmm.
whatever you want to call it. And now we're to these like stone tablets. And I don't know when exactly that shift happened, but I'm trying to think of like, I guess my first thought was like, why did we used to be like this and now we're these stone tablets? But maybe that's just kind of like signifying how big of a disconnect there is between Gendo's like group at Nerve and the council at this point. Like that's really like where the divide is. Like they're not even in the same
Yeah.
room anymore. It's like we're behind a
It's
wall.
yeah, it's that. It's more of a symbolic sort of thing because when they abducted Fuyutsuki for that interview thing where it was like that super backstory flashback heavy episode a couple episodes ago, he even acknowledges like that he was surprised they were addressing him as Sele because Sele is the background thing. If they're the Human Instrumentality Council or whatever, that's
Mhm.
considered the front facing, more public facing part of Nerve. And so it's literally the same people, but when they're
Yeah.
not doing the hologram thing, like you said, and instead it's like, here's these stone tablets, Sele, and I don't know the significance of the tablets themselves, but even he kind of addresses like, oh, okay, this must be serious if you're addressing me like from behind this screen, basically, instead of like actually the way we've always done this before. So it's just basically for whatever significance it is, I don't know, but it's basically just them like, yeah, we're not playing games, like we're in almost in-game mentality here.
Yeah. They're putting up walls.
Yeah, exactly. They can't get through our AT fields.
So they asked Gendo at that point. They said, do you intend to betray Sele? This is after the meeting kind of gets interrupted. I think that was the last line.
Yeah.
This is the first notice I had of somebody saying Zele, and
Yeah.
when I heard that, I was just like, I feel like somebody tried to type Sele into a script and it auto corrected to Zele, and they were like, hey, it says Zele on the paper, man. I'm reading it like that.
Right. Yeah, I mentioned that before when we were first watching this. I was like, even though the Netflix dub does fix some things in terms of inconsistencies compared to other English dubs about pronunciation of things, whether it be a name or an organization or whatever, it still has weird inconsistencies, not the least of which the one that makes no sense to me is the fact that we still have references to the third children. Like if we're talking about Shinji, like child, singular. Like, why is this hard? How is this left in the Netflix dub after all of this time? But yeah, I mentioned, I think in the past, like Sele, Zele. Okay, I think there's one instance where someone says Sile, and I'm like, pick one. I will go with whatever, but pick one.
I'm going to give you a reason for why it's the third children and all the children instead of child,
Okay.
because there is the Shinji within himself,
Ah,
and
yes.
there's the Shinji that others see. So
Yep.
he is not one child, he is children.
I thought you were just going to say, especially after the Direct C thing, that there's multiple Shinjis now, and it's almost like split personality disorder, but they're all Shinji, but they're different interpretations of himself. And that sounds like a very Ava answer. You can't deny that.
Yes, for sure.
Like your subconscious, your split personality is literally still you, but the you that someone else assumes you are. Oh my god, that
Uh,
is. I can't even imagine trying to like process that, like just as a like how you would write that episode to like explore it, interpret it, explain it. It just seems so madness. Um, but yeah, this particular angel is this episode does not wait long. Like we're all still in the first 5 or so minutes of this episode. We've been moving quick through these quick little scenes. I know we've already been talking for like 25 minutes, but these are all pretty snappy. We're going, and now we're in an angel attack here. And the first thing that's kind of interesting is they of course call up Unit Zero, but Gendo kind of surprises everybody when Misato's like saying like, "Yeah, leave Unit 2 grounded." Gendo's like, "No, no, no, send her up. She might still be useful as a decoy." And I'm like, his mother effer just told the council last episode that we could not risk losing Unit 2. And here he is going like, send her up there. If she dies, she dies. I'm like, that's if you needed any further confirmation, he was just trying to get rid of the Spear of Longinus because it played into Sele's plans. This is it. Because now that
yeah.
there's no explanation for why he's doing a particular thing, he's like, I know, roll her out. She's a 15-year-old girl who can't even move her Ava at this point. If she dies, she dies. Maybe the thing distracts the angel for a moment. And
Yeah,
everybody
she's definitely expendable at this point to him.
Yeah.
Which even I think last episode or maybe episode before then, he was like, she's not, we can't get her out of the picture yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is the yet. Like here we are.
Are you surprised that they actually send like not just that they send her up, that they even had her bother like suiting up and getting into her Ava? They've already announced that they're going to start looking for a new pilot. She's worthless at this point. She knows she's broken and done. Like, I'm shocked they even go through the process of putting her in her suit and in her Ava, to be in this position to even be sent up to the surface for this fight.
Yeah, my next line on my notes was, she still has a job? Because, like, after last time, it's like, golly, why would there's nothing for you to do at this point. You don't listen to orders. You don't get anything done. Like,
your sync rate's dropping every time.
Yeah, you're going through a horrible mental breakdown, and damn, if we thought she was defeated last week, it's a whole new level today because she is as broken gets. And so we get they send out the first one. I guess Asuka is trying to get sent out. This is when her sync rate is so low that she can't move, right?
Yeah, single digits. They send her to the surface and they're telling her to get the rifle they're about to send up and then take some sort of strategic position. And it's not responding. And Misato's like, Asuka, get the gun, move. And someone finally pipes up like, she can't. Her sync rate's in the single digits. And Asuka's like in the cockpit, just like practically crying, just like shaking the controls, trying to get it to respond. And it's just like, yeah. It's also crazy that the fact that she's been like AWOL now from, again, her guardian is Misato. She's been AWOL from Misato's house for several days. And then she just is allowed to walk back in and like, was someone not monitoring the situation and seeing her continue to further sink, a stone in a lake, further sink to the bottom? And now they're just like, all right, send her up. Everything's fine. I'm sure she'll be able to control her Ava. Like, no, you idiots. Of course she can't. It's one of those weird places where I'm like, I just feel like almost across the board, everybody fails Asuka here. Because like, if you needed to further destroy her ego, which to her is especially critical, this has to be the absolute worst final blow you can really deal, right? Like, now you're so pathetic you can't even make your Ava turn on. It won't even respond to you anymore. At least before it wasn't as agile or whatever, or you were limited in your ability. Now you can't even get the thing to respond to you. So yeah, that doesn't go well.
She's done.
Yep. Misato fortunately makes the call to immediately draw her back so that she's not just obliterated up there. I'm surprised Gendo didn't like chime in and like, no. I know what I was doing. Leave her.
Just let it.
Yeah.
Let it happen. But
that forces him. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to talk about Masato showing up, because there was a line that made me think that there might be a little something to it.
Yeah.
Is Risuko asked Masato, "What were you doing?"
Mm-hmm.
Implying that she has gotten there significantly late. Would be my thought.
Yeah. So
And she's got to. I mean, she was. I realized she's been in her like little cave listening to the voicemails, but I did not get the impression that that's what was happening. I feel like she might have been doing some other investigation or somewhere
mm-hmm.
else beforehand. So I don't know where she was, but I feel like that's a good
Yeah.
question.
It is a very good question. I don't know where she was, but I do know like when she gets the report, the call of the angel attack, she's in her car driving from somewhere and she confirms that like she can see it. We don't know where she was, but we do know that she's starting now to try and follow through. And we saw kind of in a couple episodes ago where she was starting to look into things, right? Like she found out from her source about the mass production line of the Evas that they're trying to roll out. So she's been doing some stuff, and we just don't know where she was in this particular instance. But Risuko I think Risuko's fully aware, especially now that she's probably also figured out that Kaji's dead and what happened. She's basically just like, yeah, she's probably digging around, but I know you want to get to the truth, but you're digging around here is causing us problems here, almost like you're already flirting with getting in like serious trouble or a bullet in the head or whatever down the road, but you're screwing things up in the interim, like now for everyone. Like you have to be here to be doing this. And Misato's basically just like, shut up, don't worry about it. Like I'm here.
Now, I've got a little surprise for you that you might not know.
Go for
There's
it.
an alternate scene that showed where Masato was at this point that they cut from the show. Did you know about this?
Did not that I am aware of. Lay it on me.
So, Masato, before driving in the car, is at Kaji's watermelon patch and has made a watermelon that looks just like Kaji. She's making out with it when she gets the call.
I hate that it took me about 3 or 4 seconds after you said watermelon to start to realize, like, wait a minute, this doesn't sound legitimate at all.
This does not sound real.
Oh my god. I was like, because initially I was like, yeah, it would be funny. Initially I was like, okay, he did ask her to water his flowers. She knows about the watermelon patch. Maybe there's another clue there, or nope. Kaji make out with okay, yep. At least it's a make out and not a what are you putting there sort of thing. more clues. I left you a bunch of capsules, but you're gonna have to smuggle them in.
We're keeping it PG. We're keeping it PG today.
As best we can. Yeah, interesting. So
we get into the Magi next, I believe, and they're talking about that they can't provide an answer because they don't have enough data to work with as far as what's going on with the angel.
The Magi is constantly flipping between a code blue and a code orange. Code blue is confirmed angel. Code orange means they don't know yet. And so they're just trying to figure out, like, is this thing actually an angel? Is this like a threat? And the Magi isn't sure, which that's the first time we've seen the Magi kind of fooled by this. And Misato's telling Rei, like, all right, well, let's not make the first move here. Let's just see what happens. Kind of just sit and, like, basically just set up camp, wait, and let's just see. But Rei is able to see, like, no, it's happening. And this is an interesting angel because it almost looks like a giant glowing, what would you even say, like, tapeworm in the sky? Like, yeah, it's formed like a halo initially, but it separates and it's like a long cord. And it immediately pierces through Rei's AT field and embeds in Unit Zero's belly. And you're just like, oh, that's bad. Even before you start seeing what it's doing, just something slicing through an AT field like that, you're like, that's not good. Nope. And you can see, like, it looks like something, it almost looks like tree roots or something, like growing like through the Eva's core, and you can see it even on Rei's physical body. Again, the neural connection kind of makes it where you're experiencing the same thing the Eva is to an extent. And so you just have this, like, it looks like almost like thick tree roots, like sprouting through Unit Zero. And everyone in the command center is like, holy crap, like, this is not good. Risuko is immediately saying that's over 5% of Unit Zero already fused to the angel. And you're like, oh, fusion, this is really bad. Like, this is like we're losing everything here with Unit 0 and probably Ray to this. This isn't just like, oh, it's like under the skin or whatever. Like, no. It's like connected at this point. And so this is already devastating them, and they're like, okay, well, we pulled back Unit 2. We're gonna have to figure out something here. But we do this all 3 times. All 3 pilots have their own sort of moment where they're confronted by an angel, and you get this sort of look inside their heart, essentially. So now we get one with Ray. The angel is confronting Ray. She again is seeing, she can feel this sort of presence there, and she's trying to make sense of what she's seeing and feeling. And the quote I got here from her is, she's like, "Is this me? The me inside the Eva? I sense somebody here other than myself. Who are you? An angel? The person we refer to as an angel?" That sentence kind of tripped me up. I was like, person we refer to as an angel? Like, what? Like, this thing is also might as well be a human? I know they've told us before that like human DNA is shockingly close, like similar to angel DNA, but just one of those things where you're just like, huh? I don't think this thing looks quite the same as us. And the angel's asking her if she wants to be one. Ray says no, to which the angel's basically like, damn, that sucks, because that's what's already happening, yo. Like, it's already happening. There's nothing you could do. Like, oh, well, sorry you feel that way, but we've already started the process. Ray, you see the physical distress and everything, but she's not really responding to it. Like, she's kind of gritting her teeth, but she's not like giving into it in terms of like the physical or mental distress you would expect in that case. But the angel basically keeps kind of prodding, trying to get her to open up a little bit. And Ray tries to sort of flip the tables on the angel, where she's like, no, you're the one who feels lonely. You feel loneliness. And the angel's like, what do you mean? I don't understand. And Ray says, you don't want to be alone. There are so many of us, but you're alone and you hate it. That's what loneliness looks like. Then the angel slaps down a reverse Uno card on Ray, because she's like, no, you're looking inside your own heart, son. Like, that's what you're feeling. You see yourself in this. We're in your heart, dumbass. And that's what finally breaks down Ray's defenses, where all of a sudden she realizes, like, oh, I'm crying. What's happening here? I feel like that's the nutshell version here. What do you got? Anything I'm missing out on?
That was as perfect as I could have possibly described that whole thing. The reverse Uno card was good too.
I thought that was a good one too. Yeah,
that's impressive. I like that.
Yep. And Asuka, when she finds out, they're freaking out, because once Ray realizes she sees her own heart and she's crying, it's almost like her guard is down, her ego is broken, and now the angel is really starting to overtake her. And so as Asuka is being lowered down, they're sending Shinji back up. Asuka is kind of moping, like, that's not fair. They didn't send Unit 1 when I was in trouble. Like, you complained last episode about Shinji saving the day, and now here you are like, oh, it's not fair. I needed saving and no one helped. Like, it's one of these things where communication would probably just help. Like, Shinji was literally arguing with his father to send him up to help Asuka last episode, but they wouldn't let him do that. But Asuka doesn't know that, and so she just assumes that Shinji, like everyone else, was just waiting on the sidelines while she was mentally violated, basically.
Yep.
And so yeah, it's just further destroying her sense of worth as she, sees herself and experiences around others what she thinks they think of her and how much they care.
Yeah, and let's talk about this angel when it. I don't really know what it's doing at this point, but it changes Ray's Eva and just like sprouts this big brown. What I said is, this is like the cockroach guy from Men in Black when he like gets out of the human body and like fully becomes himself. It looked exactly like that scene, but it's doing that to the Eva. I wouldn't be surprised if Men in Black, kind of took this as inspiration.
Maybe this came out in '96. Men in Black was '97.
Yeah, see, calling you out, Men in Black. Pay some royalties. So Gendo launches Unit 1. We get through all that. Asuka's little sad thing, and then Shinji is starting to engage. And when he grabs this thing, it's doing the same kind of like veiny, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
like tree trunk thing. But his
And that's what I
hands,
think the thing growing up is, by the way. I think it's almost like a metaphor or stand-in, almost like a tree of
like a
life,
tree. Yeah.
like a
Okay.
tree of life specifically, like an angel from an artificial human, like the type
Mm.
of contact, not a something that would start the third impact. But I think that's sort of what they're going for, and that's why I used the tree root imagery when I was describing that earlier.
Yeah, that's good. Um, so we're looking at his hands when he's holding this thing, and you can kind of see like little faces start to form as
And hear
he's hearing
voices.
he's hearing voices like Ray is telling him, "Oh, this hurts."
Well,
Which
that's after he stabs with the freaking prog knife.
oh, was that the after
And
the knife?
initially, it's just kind of her laughter, and
Yes.
Misato, knowing it's fusing, says, "Use the prog knife." He stabs the angel, and then you hear Ray's blood curdling scream, and
Yep.
all the faces are appearing in the hand that's fusing, and she's like, "It hurts," and that's where you're just like, "Oh, I'm shocked angels haven't been using psychological warfare earlier." Like,
Yeah, they're good at it.
yeah, like that is so effective, and like I don't know how you're able to like compartmentalize to put that away, because even if in Shinji's case there he does pack that away and kill the angel impersonating Ray or whatever, how do you then go and see like Ray and be around Ray after that and not just be like, oh god, I feel horrible because like I have like the memory and very distinct visualization of like brutally murdering you essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we get to this part where it talks about her AT field is inverting at this point.
Oh, hold on. So right before that starts, when Ray sees the voices or hears the voices and realizes the angel is kind of impersonating her, because it's still connected to her, she questions like, "Is this what's inside my heart? Do I have the desire to be with Shinji?"
Oh
Basically,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then that's when she basically starts to set her Eva into meltdown, essentially, the inverting thing. So jump in there.
Yeah, and I don't know if have we ever seen this like as you said meltdown mode type thing happen before because I don't remember seeing anyone do this to this point. We're looking at this thing called I guess on hers it's drive A mode D is what she's like
Mm-hmm.
manipulating when it turns the Ava into a bomb essentially.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, she's trying to contain this Ava or this angel, and it talks about the field is maxing out, won't be able to maintain the core much longer. And at this point, there's like this growth from her core, which I guess is her containing the angel in the core of her Ava
Yeah.
at this point,
Yeah.
which is what she's trying to explode. So she says, I can't eject because without me, the AT field disappears and then the angel's going to get free.
Yep.
So she's taking it all upon herself to like, how do I protect Shinji in this moment? Which
Mm-hmm.
is character growth for her, I would say, as she's getting more and more like a normal human being. And as much as we say she's got a soul, which is discussed a little bit later in this episode, I feel like I'm like, yeah, maybe like 25 to 50% of the soul. She's still like
Yeah.
this weird little half human type thing, but she's got things that she
Yeah.
does that I think are good.
And we'll get into it later when that reveal comes. But I figured out how to tiptoe into the theory I want to discuss without getting into spoiler territory. So we'll be able to delve into that in that respect. Uh, the interesting thing here is as the core of her Ava is collapsing into the belly, you see her kind of rise up, and it almost looks like a ghostly sort of visage of like Ray, and she's like reaching out towards something, and you see Ray kind of having this like glimpse of like Gendo smiling or something, and as she's like reaching out and crying, that's when it then just completely explodes, like just detonates, and Ray is gone. So in the span of 2 episodes, we have basically irrevocably lost Asuka effectively, and now Ray is gone, and you're just like, Shinji, how confident are you feeling these days? Working on those fist curls? Is that what makes you confident? Because they should get him one of those like little springy weight things that was like
Yeah.
test your hand strength, and just have him sitting in the corner gripping all the time. Because we're down to one Neva pilot, and I understand he's the best of the three at this point, but good googly moogly. That is not a good place to be heading into these final episodes.
Yeah, and Masato at this point is I don't know what her emotion is. It's like a combination of like
Denial.
rage and
Mm-hmm.
denial, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
She's like literally shaking watching this happen.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's
She wants them to look for
this.
survivors. Ritsuko is like, if there even are survivors. And Misato rounds like she wants to hit her, but like she doesn't do anything. She just kind of like glares, but I think she knows. She just does, like, no one survives that. It's
Yeah.
not even possible to survive that. Ray stayed in the cockpit. Like it's done. But she doesn't want to face that because it's the first of her 3 pilots. She's never lost someone. Like, think about this. They're the first Eva pilots. She's never lost someone in her command. And so to lose someone like this, I think is probably particularly devastating for her.
Yeah. So you'll have to tell me what the next moment is here because I have something that I don't want to say if it's not the right time. But
Okay. So we have them looking for the wreckage of Unit 0. Risuko is in a big like contamination suit basically, and they find the entry plug, and she tells the person who's like, "Hey, we found the entry plug." She looks and her quote is, "This is now a top secret operation." And she says, "Retrieve the plug and dispose of any related components." So whatever they found, they're going to immediately try and sweep under the rug.
yeah, I guess I'm just gonna go. We're gonna go over it anyways. But I
Go for it.
think Ray might have mentioned being a third iteration at this point, or is that come
She's not.
after
She's
the
no.
crash site?
That comes after. That's. I think that's what Risuko is mentioning because I think she already knows. No matter what they find here, they're going to pretend they didn't find Ray's dead body.
Yeah.
And again, you saw like before the ship detonated, like her own physical body is like fused into Unit 0. Like as she was telling them, like, I can't eject. She says, like, because the AT field wouldn't last. I was like, also because you're like fused to it, like you below the waist are like connected at this point. Like it's all one piece. You don't have your normal human anatomy down there.
And you can like see this in the scene
Yeah,
because I must have
yeah.
missed that.
Look at her like waist down. It looks almost like she's like melting into the ship, into the Ava at that point. Like I don't think she could have ejected even if she'd wanted to. So yeah, I think they're covering up that she died because, as we find out moments later, oh look, the hospital called. Ray's fine. But we'll get to that in just a second because we're gonna get it first into a little bit of a. Well, here we'll get there. So Sele is going over the long laundry list of the angels that they faced and defeated, and they note that there is only one more angel as foretold by the Dead Sea Scrolls. The time of promise draws near. The road has been long and much has been sacrificed. They are upset about losing the Spear of Longinus and Ava Unit 0. They're also pissed about that. Some of the council members obviously want to punish Gendo, but others are, they're kind of making allusions to another sacrificial lamb, which I guess is what they want Gendo to be. But someone else points out, like, we need someone who knows the whole truth, and there are kind of not many of those at this point. So then we
Except for...
Yeah. We have Risuko looking at an old photograph of herself and her mother, and again, and Gendo is pictured alongside him as well, as if it's like a family photo, which I thought was really odd. So that shot following after them talking about like, we want to see about bringing in someone new. I was like, well, if there's one other person that it would probably be on the, the no, as it were, that's probably it. And she might be bitter enough towards him to actually to do that. But now we get into the controversial scene. So this is sort of an infamous scene in Evangelion. In Shinji's room, he's listening to music with his headphones. He's, visibly numb by everything that's just occurred. And Misato knocks on the door and just says, hey, I'm coming in. It's one of probably 2 very controversial Misato scenes in Evangelion. So she sits on the bed next to him, and her voice kind of hollow, or his voice is hollow essentially, and he's saying he feels so sad, but no tears will come. He's just confused about it. And Misato basically says, I wish there was something more I could do. but I can do this. And so she goes and tries to put like her hand on his. He jerks away and basically, kind of covers himself up and says, "Stop it. Please don't, Miss Misato." She apologizes and leaves. There's a surprising contingent of fans that seem to think that, and it's open to interpretation, I guess, seem to think that she was basically offering like physical comfort, like as far as like, I guess, sleeping with Shinji essentially.
Really?
I'm not even kidding. That's like I'm not going to say that's the prevailing theory, but it's a noticeable enough thing. If you look up episode 23 Misato, it's a whole discussion thread. And it's because they're pairing it with other context that comes later that I think, in my opinion, causes them to recontextualize this a little bit. I never got that impression.
It's
I
a
think
weird scene. That's
it
for
is.
sure.
It
It
is.
like because I that's the scene that stuck out more than anything else. And I don't even know if I wrote that. I'm sure I wrote that somewhere in my trying to hold his hand.
Yeah.
But as I was watching it, I was like, I don't get what just happened there. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get that it was like, hey, let's have sex. I got something weird out of it. I just don't know what it was.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was a little lost there.
So the reason I think, without getting too far down the road of the thing that I think makes people recontextualize it, we know that Misato uses her looks and her sexuality at times to get what she wants. She even has said as much to Kaji, like when they would have their time together, that she's really doing that. Yeah, it's fun, but it's also like her kind of getting information or something. Like there's a purpose behind it. And then after he rejects her, Shinji, and she leaves, she initially she's confused by it initially. She's like, well, he's afraid of others. Like I didn't expect him to be afraid of others, but I guess he's just afraid of getting close to people. To which she's like, or no, hold on. Misato apologizes, leaves, thinking to herself she knows he's lonely. There it is. She knows he's lonely, but wonders if he's also afraid of women. And then the quote is, "No, he's afraid of getting close to others." After that, she comes across Pin Pin and she kneels down. She's like, "Oh, come here, little guy." And Pin Pin just kind of like looks at her like, "Eh." And then she realizes like, "Oh no, I'm the one who's lonely here. Like anyone would do right now." And I think it's that she's looking for some sort of comfort herself. And again, I don't take that in a sexual way. I know that might be.
Talk about dark. That feels darker than all the rest of it.
I think she's a character who will weaponize her sexuality. I don't think that's what's happening here. Like to me, I think the putting her hand on his, it's physical comfort, not in the sexual nature. It's like all I can do is be here for you and like hold you, basically, like hug you, hold you, whatever. If that's what you need, I'm here. And Shinji's like doesn't want to be touched by anybody. He doesn't want, like, he doesn't like it. That's what I took from it. But that is such a, and even before we got halfway through the show, I was seeing that conversation in researching for this. And so I was like, okay, we'll have to talk about it. But I don't agree with that being the thing. That's just, I've seen that discussed and brought up numerous times. And maybe when we get to that other one, you'll view it differently. I don't think that's what it is. I think it's just she's trying to be there for him. She doesn't know what to do. And so it's kind of like, I'm kind of just making this up as I go and guessing. So I can just be here for you because I don't know what to say after something like that. So physically I'm here, but I don't take it as like physically I'm here.
Yeah, that's a weird one. I don't know. That one confused me so much. I don't know what to think about it. So let's revisit after this
Yeah.
other thing happens.
Yep.
And I want to go real quick back to Rasuko. There was a moment where we're going through like that little story right before this, and I wrote, "Whoa, hold up! Is she a clone of her mom?" And
I've wanted to talk about this. I've wanted to talk about this so long. Okay. And there's nothing concrete on it. But that is another very popular fan theory, that Risuko is in fact a clone of her mother. Um, I don't. I can see the for and the against for it. Like, I don't. I don't think she probably is, but it is interesting to look at because it would make sense why then she also was drawn to Gendo, kind of repeating, even if she doesn't have the specific memory, still having like the draw towards similar people. Um, so just like her mom kind of being drawn towards Gendo, we know she looked so much like her mother that she dyed her hair and got a haircut just to try and differentiate herself. That no one ever, like when she was in school, no one ever looked at her or treated her as anything different from her mother because they knew who her mother was. And so, like, that's why she did all that stuff. And it would make sense then why Dr. Akagi felt like she was so expendable, not just the Magi computer, because yeah, she had finished the foundational theories of the Magi at the time, but I would still assume like, well, the thing still had to be built, right? Like earlier in that day in that episode where Ritsuko's like writing to her mom, like, yeah, and I got this job with Garen. I'm going to be doing all this. Oh, by the way, congratulations on the foundational theories of the Magi. So later on, when then her mom kills little Ray the first, and is kind of commenting on you're just as expendable as I am, I was like, is the Magi already built? Because that's normally what I would have thought when you would be expendable. But the clone theory would then suggest, like, oh, yeah, and we just hired your clone, your daughter. And guess what? She's going to do your same work. If I don't want you as a romantic partner, now here's how I can move forward with that and not have all this mess going on here, you know? Yeah, her telling Ray, you're just as expendable as I am. And Ritsuko kind of has her own similar comment later on in the episode. So there's stuff to it where if you want to explore that, there's certainly stuff that is circumstantial but seems to support it.
Yeah, and I definitely got the feeling in that episode where little Ray gets strangled to
Mm-hmm.
death, um, that Rasuko may have been responsible for her mother's death. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I think we are initially led to believe it was probably suicide, but after kind of seeing Rasuko see the kiss between her mother and Gendo,
Mm-hmm.
I felt that there was something weird to that scene. Like, why did we need that necessarily? But I think that could be more of like towards, oh, hey, that's someone that I'm passionate about. If I'm the same as you, why do I need you here? Like, and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, that as much as I think even if you were a clone, your older version would be somewhat of a mother, father, mentor to you. That's
Because
like
there's
really
never
like,
a mention of her father.
yeah, that's really bringing you into this world. And with the way that her mother seemed to be, she
Mm-hmm.
definitely did not seem to be like somebody that was in any sort of like an intimate relationship. So, and we know that Ray was created, so that may have been tested prior.
So then the question that would open the door to is why then was Ritsuko's mother surprised to see young Ray the first time? Like, she clearly was aware that they had the program. She would have had to have had some involvement with it. But why is she surprised to see young Ray? Maybe it's speculating here. It could be that it had been used once before, because we do see Risuko, who, as I commented before, despite being projected to be visibly, we think, the same age as Misato in the current thing, we're told they're 29 and 30 respectively. When we see them first introduced in the same episode, like their youngest selves we see in the episode, even though it's in the same year, to me, Misato always looked several years younger. And obviously, Ray wasn't born and then had 5 full years to age. She was aged up. So maybe something similar happened with the Risuko clone, and she was just a few years more along the way. Like maybe she's starting out at 16, essentially, to be in line with like, okay, now a few years of kind of building her up and everything, and then she'll be in place to do this. I don't know. It's a fun theory. Another reoccurring theme in Evangelion is kind of like repeated cycles of trauma or abuse, kind of following in the same path and mistakes of your parents to an extent. There's examples of that as well. And so if you wanted to go against the clone theory on that, you could just say she's following the same destructive behavior as her mother did. Misato kind of to a lesser extent as well, again, working for Nerve. Well, it wasn't called Nerve when her dad was involved, but basically this war against the angels essentially, and doing all of this, kind of following in his path, even though she hates him and everything. So that's to the counter. But I think I don't know that I can find a definitive answer for it, and I've looked, but I have had the same thought, and I do think it is very interesting the if Risuko is a clone, and it would also, I think, explain some of the emotional distance she maintains, because nature versus nurture, she was basically a science experiment that was never nurtured, and so herself, her own hard wiring is to assume from a logical standpoint.
Yeah, and not getting us too far off track, because I know we're already probably really long on this episode. Um, but I think the mother thing could be a combination of reasons. And now I'd have to go back and watch it again, like kind of thinking about that more from the clone perspective. But I think that there could be a couple of things there. I think part of it could be not realizing that he's been working on a clone of Rey kind of behind her back. Probably, I mean, if he was going to do that, he would do it away from her, because he already realizes that she has this infatuation with him. She wouldn't be on board for that. So him doing it in secret would make a lot more sense. And her being a little bit taken back just by the fact of like, hey, he's been doing this behind my back. There's also probably a unrealistic expectation of like his love for her. And as much as she knew that, like, I forget Rey's original name before Shinji's mother's name.
Oh, Yui.
Before, you know, we kind of hear this conversation about like, no, you still love Yui. Like, I think that she wants to believe that he's gotten over Yui as much as possible, even though she knows in her heart that he hasn't.
And now here's Rey.
And now here's Rey. So it's like, you know, this just like really broken level of like trust and deception that's taken place, which could lead to it. But yeah, I mean, I can see that. I'd have to look back to really get more.
It's a fun one. It's a fun one to look down, or a fun rabbit hole to venture. I think it would be really cool if it was. I just haven't found enough to definitively like support it.
Yeah.
So elsewhere, we have Gendo watching over the orange test tube that housed Rey. We don't see what he's looking at in the test tube, but Fuyusuki comments that she was always the product, referring to Rey, always was the product of his despair. However, he does say that she remains a vessel of hope for Gendo. And as such, he supposes getting over her, meaning Yui, is impossible. Just then, the phone rings at Misato's, and they rush to the hospital because apparently Rey has miraculously survived. I like how they like present this, and like you basically have just enough time to go like, no effing way. And then it's like, yeah, no, you're right. You got us. Because Shinji's like, sees Rey, and I like as well that her bandages and injuries all seem to match what she was introduced as in the first episode, which makes me wonder, like, was that the second Rey? Or was that the latest Rey? Like, is that just like the assembly line, how they almost roll out with that? Or is this just a callback reference to episode 1? I don't know. I assume it's just a callback reference. But she's got the bandage over the eyes and everything. And he thanks Rey for saving her. She has no memory of it. She's like, oh, I saved you? And he's like, yeah, don't you remember? And she's like, no, but that's probably because I'm the third one. There's like, maybe Shinji shouldn't be so surprised then by what comes later.
Yeah, so I definitely think the first time we meet her, and I'd have to look at the scene side by side, but it looks like a almost like a, hey, look, somebody just got through an accident. Let's give her a patch on her right
Yeah.
eye and put her arm in a sling. It looked almost identical to what we see when Shinji first meets her.
Hmm.
So my guess is that's when second iteration comes into play. I was kind of surprised that she's only on the third because I feel like with the episode where she like runs at the angel with
The
the
N2
A2
mine.
mine.
Yeah.
I feel like that could have been a third and she could have been on a fourth right now, but
Hmm.
that's fine. At least we know that some of them are dying. Um, and let's see.
We can then go back to Gendo's. Wait, hold on. Ray bandages. Okay, no. So after this,
The
we're
cracked
at her
glasses.
apartment. Ray disbandages and looks at her reflection, as well as Gendo's glasses. She's seeing kind of like a glimpse of like the life of the previous Ray, the previous clone, and she starts to kind of like try to break Gendo's glasses in her grip, but then she notices she's crying again. And it kind of suggests she's like holding on to almost memories of the previous Ray, which kind of raises some interesting questions. We don't really get to explore them, but we do get to kind of like raise those questions. Um, I don't know. What did you sort of take of that?
Yeah, I definitely. I don't know. It's hard for sure. I mean, you can tell that whatever is happening, there's some pain with this version of Ray.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know that like I would say Gendo is directly related to like what happened to the last Ray. I mean, I'd say he was pretty like uninvolved, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know why she's feeling the way she's feeling at this time. I just know like there's some hatred that she's feeling.
Okay.
So I don't know. I don't know
Well,
if I can figure it out at this point.
yeah. Well, we'll keep delving. So in Gendo's office, he says the status of Unit 1 remains the same. Fuyusuki says that Sele will be unhappy when they learn that Ray has survived. So it basically is another example of Gendo moved heaven and earth basically to keep a pawn on the board, and that's suspicious. Like, why would he do this basically to like resurrect Ray unless he had a specific need for them that did not align with like an order he was given?
Yeah.
But Gendo just dismisses it, saying they have other things to worry about. Risuko is then brought before Sele, completely naked for interrogation. And they're like, "Oh, we don't mean to embarrass you any further." And she's like, I'm not embarrassed at all." She's like completely unaffected, being stripped down naked in front of all these weird dudes. And they're just like, "Oh, what a strong woman you are. No wonder Gendo has kept you by his side for all these years." They're basically interviewing her to kind of replace Gendo, like they inferred to earlier. And it turns out Gendo sent, rather than sending Ray to the council, to Sele to be interrogated, he sent Risuko as a proxy, which that realization gets the first sort of rise kind of out of Risuko, like not like in like a visibly shaken way, but just she kind of comments like, "Wait, I'm Ray's replacement." Like because to her and her insecurity, it almost feels more like the opposite is true. Which, by the way, that would also play fun to the clone theory. If she was a clone before Ray, and then Ray is like replaced her like in a more literal sense, and now look what he's doing to do all this for her. But yeah, it's you don't know exactly what's going to happen with that at the time. At Misato's apartment, you got the same working do not disturb sign. The place is still a pit, but she's assembling pieces from 36 means of contact that Kaji tried to use to contact her to share his discoveries about Nerve. It's time to circle back to the capsule. Misato declares that she's done crying over a phone that won't ring because she has his heart with her now. The caption said his heart is inside her now. I'm like, the caption makes it sound like she's pregnant. I don't think that's what they're going for, but their last scene together was sleeping together. I don't think there's anything else that supports it, so I don't know if that's something that in the subtext just didn't make the translation or the dubbing, I don't know, but I was
I
like
took that as more of like his heart being to figure out the secrets behind Nerve.
his mission
Um,
almost.
yeah, his mission, his drive, his
Yeah.
like really his like life's work
Mm.
is in her now, and she's like taking on the fight.
Okay. Yeah,
That's what I got out of it.
that's the more straightforward thing. And like I said, there's nothing else to support the possible pregnancy thing. So that's probably the simplest answer of it. It was just a case where the caption, I was like, wait, when I read this and I take it more literally, it feels like it's telling me something different. That would be like, oh shit, but it doesn't really explore that. So Sele we see Risuko coming down an escalator. She looks very shaken, not really saying anything, but you hear the people from Sele talking over her basically, and they're questioning kind of if they made the right move. Basically, it sounds like they fired her because I'm guessing she remained loyal to Gendo. Maybe that was their concern in that case, but they've basically relieved her of duties is how I'm taking this scene. And she's kind of distraught because it's like, so for everything you sacrificed, all your life work and your purpose, that's now been ripped away from you. Okay. Maybe it's a misdirection though, because it still seems like she's kind of going towards Sele's plan. Ultimately, like there's one angel left, and her telling Shinji, like she calls Misato's apartment and tells Shinji, no more restrictions, you can go wherever you want. So she always apparently had the power to do that. And that's what we're going to move to in the next episode, is that next encounter. And so I feel like she still plays into that. So maybe this is a misdirection. Small spoiler there. But I don't know. They're talking about how they have 8 Evas available, 4 more to come. And the quote is that I wrote here is, the obliteration of Tokyo 3 will definitely be a boon to what we have planned. Expedite the last 4, meaning the Evas. Once they're done, we will begin. Yeah. So now we get into the big reveal to close out this episode. I'll let you take that there.
Yeah, so after Risuko lets Shinji know that he's not under watch anymore, he can safely go outside. She is trying to badge into the door that we have seen, which is where Kaji and Misato met before they saw Adam for the first time. And in a similar fashion, Misato puts a gun to her back, just like she did with Kaji, and says it won't work without her pass. And Misato tells Risuko that she's going to show her all the secrets with her own eyes, and Risuko says, okay, but he's coming with us. And then light flips on in the back, and it's Shinji, which Misato doesn't seem even like remotely fazed by for some reason.
No.
I figured she'd be like, oh, hey, that's weird that you brought him into this because you seem to always be more on the other side of things. But she was just like, yep, cool, sounds good. He should know this too. So let's
I just wanted to know who was operating that light, because that was pitch perfect timing. Yeah. Okay, but he's coming too. Like, Shinji, it's like trying to like set that up like, Shinji, 2 steps to the left. No, forward. Okay, good. All right, light switch. Like, it's just like such perfect positioning, and it's like a spotlight right overhead of him. Like, that's an unnecessarily complicated light. Like, I understand it being dark down here, mysterious, but that one light having its own switch feels very nonsensical to me.
Maybe it's one of those, like, you know, the grocery store lights where the freezer doesn't light up until you walk by it.
Yep, maybe. Yeah, so inside we see the artificial evolutionary 3 lab, which was supposedly...
Say that 5 times fast.
I will not. I can barely say it once, regular speed. Supposedly this was Rei's room where she was born and raised, because Shinji comments like, well, hey, this looks just like Rei's Ayanami's apartment. And she's like, yeah, that makes sense. This is basically like what she was born and raised in. Then in the next room, we see the massive storage of Eva skeletons and remains. The first ones, the first attempts at Eva's basically, that very much failed. And by the way, the visual aesthetic of the giant upside down cross, I was like, I don't know who your interior decorator is, but that's ominous. That is a very, very curious choice there. And Risuko's kind of playing into Shinji's distress. Like, you know, he's kind of just like taken back, like, oh, an Eva graveyard. And she's like, yeah, it's actually the place where your mother disappeared. Oh, yeah, by the way, in case you forgot, you were there that day. You saw it happen. And even Misato, who didn't give a shit that Shinji was at the door before, even she's kind of like, Ritsuko, like, stop it. Stop whatever you're doing. Stop trying to like upset him. So that was kind of interesting. Like before she just was like unfazed, but now even she's kind of like, no, I'm trying to play bad cop here, but you're making it hard when you're like going at him like this. And this is where the dummy plug basically comes from. This is we see the giant test tube that Gendo's been staring in before, with Rei floating in it, and all the tubes that look like a giant brain above. And we find out that this is a giant room filled with floating clones, soulless clones, I will add, of Rei, all floating in LCL. I have the quote here from Ritsuko, and then I'll throw it to you. She says, mankind came across a god and then tried to make it their own. 15 years ago, God inflicted his wrath. The god they were so excited about disappeared. Undeterred, they worked to resurrect their god themselves. That was Adam. And just like God, they made him for Adam. And that was Eva. They made a human for Adam, and that was Eva. Very ominous. What you
got? Let's see. I want to go back just a step.
Sure,
then we're going to come right back. When we're in Rei's room, the room where she grew up, there's just a small line that I took, which was, the imagery of this room left a strong impression on the light and water that compromises Rei's deep psyche.
Yeah.
Is there more I should be looking into that line than just like, hey, we're just saying some things?
I don't think so. Because I stopped and thought about it too, but I think they're just saying, like, I think Ritsuko being the one saying it, she just looks at all of this and it's most like basic level, like the ingredients and essentially what it makes up. Like, she doesn't view Rei, as she shows in this next part, as a person. To her, it's just like a collection of organic material that makes something up, but she doesn't view it in the sense of like having a soul. But yeah. So Eva's are humans. She confirms this to Shinji when he asks. Eva's are human, but didn't originally have souls. Souls were thus embedded within them. They also use the term in the caption, imbued within them. That is the injection of the pilots into the plugs, by the way. And she says, Rei was the only Eva ever born with a soul. The chamber of Guff was now empty. So Rei, according to this, is an Eva herself, which would make Unit 0 Evaception. Is that joke still flying? An Eva within an Eva? I don't know. But that kind of makes sense, because when you think about Unit 0 destroying, like blowing up, it did the cross.
So, hold on. Now I'm getting confused. I feel like I didn't pick up on something. So, Eva Unit 1 is Rei, or Rei herself? Rei herself is an Eva?
Rei herself is an Eva, according to this.
So she's born from Adam. You're really stepping around that
one. Hold on. Walking back here. I can't fully answer. We'll just leave that open-ended. Yeah, so humanity descended from a god, and in their then discovery of the god, they tried to make their own god. They eventually created Evas, which was like how God created Eve for Adam, essentially. Eva was created by humanity for their god, and that was that. Rei is the only Eva ever born with a soul. So it would be born in this explanation of Adam. Of Adam,
All right, we're gonna come back to that one. Let's stick to the important stuff here.
Don't
I
worry. Absurdly late, huge developments are not over yet.
Okay. I saw a nipple. I feel like that's not appropriate. I,
Lots
we've
of
been a
nipples.
no nipple show to this point, and
No
now I'm seeing
areolas, but
nipples.
nipples.
Yeah,
Yep.
I don't know what's going on, guys. You're turning my PG-13 to R, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
So
So it's a creepy scene too. You have just all these smiling rays just floating naked in the LCL
yeah, I'm very
tube, or
happy.
like basically a giant fish tank full of smiling soulless rays. And it's like the explanation is like, oh yeah, there's no soul in these things. These are just used for the dummy plugs. So literally now we know what's inside a dummy plug. And Ray's spare parts. So anytime Ray has had an injury and had to go to the hospital, they've had to basically take it from one of these clones, which like that sounds horrifying, especially if the thing is alive but it doesn't have a soul. Like they're organic, they have a heartbeat, they just don't have a soul to whatever that amounts to. So
Yeah, their
kind of
surgical procedures must be outstanding.
yeah, yeah. Very, very interesting. And again, there was the Chamber of Guff thing again. The Chamber of Guff was now empty. So, however, they managed, whether it was with whatever they extracted from the second impact in that encounter with Adam, whatever they took from that, this ability to imbue true life, a soul, whatever, seemingly was used for Ray, whether it was intentional or not. Ray was an Ava born with a soul. And so that is the uniqueness of Ray. And maybe that's why Gendo felt that he had to have her. But then you kind of look at it and you're like, well, hold on. Because Ray died when she was 5 and she just died again. How are we recycling this soul? You know?
What is the Chamber of Guff?
Oh boy.
I know we've talked about this, but we got to go back into it because I do have the line with Ray. I just didn't have anything about this. The statement was the only vessel that contained a soul was Ray, not that she's necessarily an Ava. I mean, I guess you could say if an Ava is anything born of Adam, then it's an Ava. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it's different because an Ava's like, you know, as tall as a building.
They say that Ray was the only Ava born in this caption, and it says that Ray was the only Ava ever born with a soul. So from that, I take that she has to be an Ava. So here's the Chamber of Guffs thing from episode 21. Guff is the Hebrew word meaning body. In Jewish mysticism, the Chamber of Guff, or treasury, is a treasury of souls. So in the Garden of Eden, there's the tree of life, or the tree of souls. And when it blooms, it produces souls, which then fall into the Chamber of Guff, or the treasury of souls. So from this tree of life, whatever, the souls of like humanity, essentially, the only Ava that ever was imbued with a soul was Ray, and the chamber was empty after they finally produced an Ava with a soul.
Boy, oh boy.
Yep. And then we get a very much WTF moment here. Let me find where I was in this episode's notes.
Where Rasuko chokes
Yeah.
every single one of those rays out.
Yeah, she basically says, Chamber of Guff's now empty. Risuko then proceeds to destroy all of the rays. She basically presses a button and they all disintegrate to pieces. Like limbs falling apart, heads falling off. You see spines, you see intestine. You're just like, oh my God. And even Misato is kind of like, what are you do? What, do you know what you've done? And Risuko just says, like, yes, I've destroyed property. She doesn't view it as taking lives because they don't have a soul. It doesn't matter that they have a heartbeat or whatever. For whatever tangible nature of a soul, however that changes the way you view or define a person, in her mind, it was just property of nerve because they wouldn't have had any sort of rights or anything anyway, I guess. So they're not viewed human in that legal literal definition sense. So to her, it was just property. And she's, hey, I just got fired, so I don't really give a shit. She kind of lets in that she destroyed property, not lives. And she says, and yet I couldn't compete with these things. I wasn't good enough. Thinking of him allowed me to endure any humiliation, any violation. My body means nothing to me. And yet that man, dot, 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 I should have known I'm such a fool. Mother and daughter, both fools. If you want to kill me, pull the trigger. In fact, you'd be doing me a favor. Yeah, so Gendo had affairs with both Risuko and her mother. Ew.
I didn't know. I don't. I don't know.
We're if it's in speculation territory still, we do go there, and the answer is yes.
Oh, so it's confirmed.
You have an acknowledgement eventually from Gendo.
Okay.
And it was purely from a manipulation standpoint of like, I almost view Gendo being like, oh, this again. All right, fine. If I got to have an affair for you to do everything I ask and you're useful to me, fine. Yeah, Gendo had an affair with both Risuko and her mother, and that's why she stayed around.
A clone.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why she stayed around all this time and did everything he asked and was always the good soldier. But now it seems she's also reaching her point of no longer being of use. And just like her mother, it's causing a breakdown of sorts. So just like her mother killed the one little Ray, she is destroying every potential future Ray there could ever be.
Yeah, she finally breaks down crying, which I think is the first time we've ever seen Risuko get to that point before. And Misato's last line, I believe, is tragedy of those obsessed with the Evas, and I'm no different.
Yep. And she's not. Yeah, everybody in this series is so incredibly broken and tormented, and they all have their own AT fields and the walls they put up, but inevitably everybody seemingly has them broken down at some point or another, and they're forced to kind of confront their own true nature and what they know about themselves or discover about themselves, whatever. And it's never well received. It always is an incredibly upsetting thing for them, emotionally devastating. And I think with Risuko, whether or not you subscribe to the theory that she's a clone or just a daughter repeating her mother's very same mistakes because she was so much like her as well, whichever you subscribe to, the fact is she followed in just about beat for beat every single mistake her mother made. So, yeah, I guess you could say the only thing she didn't do was have a daughter she was absentee for, but that's because she was never interested in boys to begin with, we were told. So this was a heavy episode. You know, you start off with Asuka completely numb and broken, Ray being killed. Then you have them trying to figure out like if they're going to supplant Gendo with Risuko, they being Sele. And then we get like, oh no, here's a new Ray. What? Clone. Oh, by the way, here's all the clones. Oh, by the way, Ray is an Eva. What? Not in the sense that you think of the other Evas, but generally an Eva. And I think all they mean by that is an artificial human born with a soul, by the way.
Yeah.
I think that's all that it amounts to in Ray's case. They just classify her in the same respect. But again, I have that question. Like, okay, so she's died at least twice before, we know. Does that mean, like, how are you hanging on to that soul? Also, I've noticed her personality being decidedly, like, less outspoken and vocal in each one. Like, think about how, like, bratty that little Ray was. She had 5 minutes of screen time and was just such a little snot. Got herself strangled, which I guess you could say then. Was that Gendo's plan, by the way, to, like, tell her to go say those things? Okay, we've talked around this bush a lot. What is your takeaway on Ray? Like, she is, yes, Eva has a soul. She's a clone, all that. Yes. Clone of, fill in the blank. Clone of
Shinji's mom.
Yui. Yes.
Yui,
okay.
Yeah.
So Ray is a clone of Shinji's mom. Little Ray, 5 years old, same age Shinji was at the time. Again, we know Ray was going to be the name if Shinji had been a girl. A lot of personality. The Ray 2, the second, which, by the way, if you remember the episode that we actually kind of got to know Ray a little bit, was also called Ray the Second, Ray 2. And then that one developed personality as we went on. We definitely saw it later in her arc. And now we have this third Ray, which maybe it's just that she's resetting and it's not a complete blank slate. She's not without any personality, but it's very monotone. It's kind of like resetting the character development, which is a little frustrating. But I kind of feel like the soul, if we're going to say there is a soul, it's diminishing with each iteration.
Yeah, probably.
So you had the most Ray-like / Yui-like in the first form, which again, Dr. Akagi even said that she hated Yui, and it wasn't even just because of her draw toward. She intimates it wasn't just her draw towards Gendo, but also she just didn't like the vibe she got from Yui or whatever in that Birth of Nerve episode. So it's like, okay, so if Little Ray was just like Yui, and we saw that, but then this Ray had little tendencies of it there, but not entirely the same. And now this one is just like, so are we reducing the amount of soul, or she's becoming less like Yui with every subsequent iteration? Maybe, I don't know. Kind of an interesting question there, but we can revisit it at another time when I can actually delve into my tangent theory. That is the ultimate theory. The one theory to destroy them all or rule them all. Destroying is more fun. But yeah, that's a lot of big reveals in this episode. But it was a breezier watch for me. Like, I don't know about you. Like, I took my notes. It was maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes. Like, I felt like it, because it didn't bludgeon you with so much like specific dialogue where you had to try and read between the lines or look up all these obscure terms and stuff. It just felt like things were allowed to happen and breathe. And so like I got through it much faster than I had subsequent previous episodes. So I don't know. It was a little bit refreshing after so many episodes in a row where it was just like, oh my God, pause. Okay, right. Half that sentence, play. Okay, pause. Write down the rest of that sentence. Like, oh, what's this term? Now I got to go look up this and got to go look up this obscure like symbol from Gendo's office and what that is and what that comes from. Like stuff I was doing a few episodes ago, just like, that's all cool, but man, that gets exhausting when you got to do that every episode. So This one was just like, okay, all right, I can roll with this.
I feel like we're not going to get a break the next few, but we'll see.
So next episode after this is, this one was Tears, episode 24, The Last Cometh.
Gross.
It is the last Angel's appearance, and then we get basically a two-parter to wrap up the original series. Yeah, so this will be interesting. This is, in a sense, the last regular episode of Eva because of that two-part nature. And now we got to figure out kind of where we go from here. Yes, we do have another Ray again, so we're not down to one pilot, but it's sort of a reset Ray. She's still capable. She still can do whatever, but there is no more dummy plug. Asuka is out of the mix for now. And they have another supposedly last angel coming. And this is going to be the appearance of which is supposed to kick off everything. Whether it's Gendo's plan, whether it's Sele's plan, it all branches from this angel.
I'm excited.
Yep. But those are our takes. You might deem them cheap, but to you, we say piss off. It's our takes and our podcast. If you made it this far listening to us ramble, well, that's your own fault to blame. So, but by the way, leave us a comment, subscribe, do all those things as well. Unless you don't want to, unless you're not cool and don't like the episode or show, then in which case, skip the review. But we'll be back next week and we will be doing The Last Cometh. It is the appearance of the last angel. Do you have any general closing thoughts on this? Anything, whether it's this episode or just where we're at overall?
I feel like we've come so far, and I need just so much information. I just need to get pummeled with information. So I'm hoping the next episode just like unleashes the Kraken, essentially.
Yeah. So a funny thing that happens, and again, you're not allowed to actually look at this yet because it's spoilers galore, but it's kind of a it's almost like a meme at this point in general. Like if you look at the Evangelion subreddit, every day, and I don't even think I'm exaggerating. Every day, there's someone commenting on there with like, "Okay, I need someone to explain," or "Okay, what the hell was that?" And it's like the only thing you ever have to skim for context is like, "Okay, did you just finish the series, or did you finish End of Evangelion? You finished both, okay, or did you finish the Rebuild series?" Like there's so much in this that like you go through, and it's almost like a series that on a single viewing is hard to plug every single answer. I've seen it as many times as I have, and I can't plug every single answer, but you can get everything from it to have like to make your real opinion of its value. Like I watched it for the first time several years ago, watched through all the original movie, End of Evangelion and everything, and I was like, wow. Okay, that was an experience. And I got like real into it for like a week doing all this like research into theories and everything. And then I kind of set it aside and I stepped away. And then it was when I heard that the final Rebuild movie was going to be showing in a local theater by me. I was like, ooh, now I actually want to pick up the Rebuild movies and I want to look back at the original series too. And since I did that, like I don't know, last December I think it was, I've gone through the series 2 or 3 times since then.
Hmm.
So I've been on a major kick of doing all this for a little bit, but like I have thoroughly enjoyed it and I've gleaned so much more from it now than I did in the original viewing, just because you learn little things to look for because you know certain answers later on. You kind of see scenes a little differently, whether it's certain interactions, and it just adds to it in a really unique way. But yeah, it's a very common thing for people to like watch it and be like, okay, what was any of that? Like what I'm so confused. And especially the end of this original series, which we'll do a whole episode on that. Probably, I don't know if it'll be a whole episode, but we'll do a whole thing talking about that before we do the end of Evangelion movie. So that's coming up. We're about 3 weeks out from that whole experience, that viewing experience.
Woohoo!
But we'll be back next week, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, I've been Derek.
And I've been Matt.
Peace.